Hey, I'm Ty.
And I'm Joe.
And you're listening to the 2B podcast. We're two Black educators living in Boston, seeking Black excellence. Well, that plus a lot more.
We started 2B because we thought, why can't you come together, have a good time, and while you're at it, learn something? You know what? Turns out you can, and we'll prove it.
That's right. 2B stands for many things in our life, but a prominent one that guides our steps is our desire to be educated, right? So we don't only mean with certificates and diplomas, although that's nice. We mean to be armed with the ability to critically think. Education is the means by which we propel ourselves forward.
Together, we will take a deep dive beneath the surface of our passions concerning race, equity, money, and ultimately how education sets so many aspects of our life forward.
I hear that, talking about Monday.
So let's get this started. And if you haven't done so already, follow us on and subscribe at all social media platforms using 2B Podcast.
Today's episode is Clearing the Runway, providing access to all learners. Episode 3, I think, right, Joe?
Yep, here we are.
And before we go any further, I have to shout out, especially our executive producer, David, for bringing this opportunity to us.
David in the house.
And he is part of E for E, which stands for Educators for Excellence, right? So 2B Podcast is partnering with E for E because, frankly, I think we're all trying to be, educators for excellence. And during these times, we're still trying to figure it out. And it really does take a whole community effort.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of community, E for E wants to shout out all of its teacher community members who are going above and beyond and being exemplary educators. So in the month of May coming up, they want to know who you think they should nominate. So we will be sending out a survey so you can nominate people you think should be uplifted and represented and are doing the best that they can during this time, and not only during this time, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And moreover, E for E is not just about Educators for Excellence. They are also about uplifting educator voices. And this is huge because often we are the people on the front lines, but our voice is left out of the decision making. So E for E wants to give you the opportunity to be an activist. If you have a message, if you have something you want to share, please contact Jake Reciteris, and we will also put his email in the chat. Mm-hmm. And in the survey, you can click, yes, I want to do activism. You're nervous? Don't be. They have trainings. Jake is leading op-ed trainings every Tuesday, 4:30 to 5:30. They will walk you through this. So don't let fear be what holds you back.
Absolutely. And to that point, tomorrow, a panelist of 5 educators will be sitting with city councilors and other stakeholders discussing remote learning and its impacts both mentally and academically. This will provide decision makers with the opportunity to hear directly from educators and inform their policies. And that's necessary. We need that connection, right, from the classroom all the way up to the policy level.
Absolutely. And yours truly is on that panel. So if you have any, we are specifically looking as well to uplift parent voice during this time. So if you are a parent and you have some concerns about what we need moving forward or what you need moving forward that you want to voice, please comment in the chat and we will contact you.
You know what, Joe? I have to say this time that we're in, right? This quarantine time, this distance learning time, it is a transitionary period for all of us. And now is the time to really make sure that your voice is heard. So all of those different announcements that we just gave and opportunities for activism, for op-ed opportunities, please take advantage of those. Contact us, at 2B Podcast, contact Educators for Excellence, E for E. And also, we know one of our partners that we'll be speaking with soon, the Teachers Lounge in May, they'll be also doing a lot of events and networking opportunities so that educators across the country, not just in Massachusetts, can connect and build, because we have to be the ones to shape this new normal.
Together, we are better. Together, we are better. Thank you for that. Thank you for that reminder. So as we jump in, we always want to get ourselves ready to be engaged. So, here is our mindfulness moment. Find somebody to be successful for. Raise their hopes. Think of their needs. That is former President Barack Obama.
My forever president. If you ask me. I'm just saying.
Oh man, I'm not gonna say nothing. We all have our feels. I know that might have put some people in their feels just thinking about that. But I won't go there because that's a podcast in and of itself. But I'm gonna read that one more time.
We might go there a little bit later. We might get a little political, just a little bit later, but in a different space. So stay tuned for that.
I'm gonna read it one more time. Find somebody to be successful for. Raise their hopes. Think of their needs. And I know Obama is not a poet, but I don't know about you. That sounded like poetry to my ears. So, I know it's National Poetry Month, but
it is.
That was a little poetry to me.
That's right. Shout out to all my poets out there, writers, creative writers especially, and even those that just like to partake in it. Some people just like to go to a great spoken word show. And I must say, now that I think about it, I think that's one thing I have not seen done virtually, at least that I haven't come across yet, is a virtual spoken word event, right? A virtual one. So we can still feel it. Those words really got to hit home.
Why are you giving that? Why are you giving that?
Right, I'm giving out too much. We might have to organize that. Maybe that's
exactly.
The next E for E and 2B collaboration. We'll have a spoken word night.
Yes.
A session. Yes.
So this resonated with my being. And in this time, at least for me, intrinsic motivation is scarce and fleeting. And I think right now, sometimes you do need that external source to stay the course. So Ty, I ask you, during this time, what has been your motivating force? Or just during this week? During this week, what has been your motivating force?
I'm glad you changed it up a little bit, because from week to week, day to day, I think for all of us, we're on a roller coaster of emotions, right? So I talked to you last week, right? Last podcast about feeling like I was just coming through a period of being discouraged. I'm feeling a little bit down about not really feeling like I was educating my students, not getting that connection that we all crave as educators, that person-to-person, in-person contact. So what has really motivated me this week is what I just spoke about, is I need to make sure my voice is heard as we shape this new normal, because we're going to come out the other side of this. We're going to make it through. We're going to strive, and make sure that as we are striving through this, that it becomes a place where we don't go back to what wasn't working. Because, let's be honest, some of these policies, some of the ways that we've gone about education, they haven't worked. And yet they've stayed in place. They've been implemented back in the 70s, 60s, 80s. Now is the time for change. It's time to transition. So that's really what's motivated me, is make sure that I'm understanding where we are right now and figure out what my purpose is in my place to make sure we can take it to a new place that's going to be more beneficial to a lot of folks, a lot of students that have been underserved.
Yes. You know what? Oh my goodness. You bless me. You bless me now. You bless me like when we're prepping. Like I just listening to that, I'm like, yo, if you don't have friends that sound like Ty around, you need one. You need one. Like, were you not blessed by that? Like, thank you. This is a time for transition. And what are we going to do moving forward? Making sure your voice is heard. You are finding your call to action. And what a blessing that you can think in that way during this time. You are not thinking of just where we are, but where we can go. So thank you. Thank you for that. I
don't want to go back to the way things were.
No.
I'm sorry. No. I do not want to go back to that. That wasn't working. Not for everybody, it wasn't.
Right. Not for everybody, right? And it's about time. It's always the right time to start doing what's needed for all. So yes, absolutely.
And that's why we're here today. That's what we're here to talk about today.
Yes. So in my week, my motivating force, actually it came out of office hours on Monday. One of my students who I hadn't connected with came in and chatted with me, and we got a whole assignment done, and it was really lovely. I have been on a roller coaster of a week. I thought I was like on the up and up, and like it was like, oh yeah, steady, and then it was like,
Sometimes that's how it is, right? We have to be
Oh
truthful.
my
Everything
God.
is not peaches and cream all the time.
No, it's not. And I thought I was like getting better, and it was just like, oh my goodness. So that really carried me through this week, because not only did we link that day, but we linked the 2 days after. So 3 days out of 4 this week, we have worked together on assignments. We have gotten things completed, and
Hmm.
it is the best feeling. And watching him like get it and hype himself up. And this is one of
Ah,
the moderate disability students. It was magical, and just a reminder, keep on keeping on. Like, it may not feel good today, but what you sow today, you reap, I don't know, maybe not tomorrow, but you reap at some point, right?
soon.
So that's why you keep watering. That is why I keep watering. That is why I keep replenishing the soil and making sure everything is, that it's fertile and ready to grow when my students are ready. So that's been keeping me going.
That's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's the connections, right? That's what we keep going back to, is the connections. All of us as humans, right? Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. All of us as humans are seeking those connections, right? That's what we're always looking to do. When you meet someone new out in a new place, the questions that you ask, you're seeking that connection, right? Have you ever been out somewhere, maybe on vacation, maybe you're at a new conference, and when you see someone new, the first couple questions you ask are connecting questions. Where are you
Right.
from? Right? And so, because you want to know, is it someplace I've ever been? Is it someplace that I plan to visit? Do I know someone that lives there? We're always seeking connections. And the same thing goes for our classroom, in and out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we want to remind you all, we are live. This is not your average podcast that you're listening to while you're cooking dinner in the kitchen. You're here with us now. Remember to be active in that chat. The questions I'm asking Ty and that he's asking me, we're actually asking you. We want you to sit and ponder and share and connect, like Ty just said, and connect with one another in the chat. Please connect with us in the chat. That is something that makes this like even more fulfilling, is that we get to be here and experiencing it with you all. So
Right.
please keep it active there. Okay. So we're all on social media. It's funny that I now can kind of include myself in that.
Welcome,
Thank you,
welcome back.
podcast, for like slowly dragging me into the realm of social media all over again. And I'm finding, and just through social media and also like with talking with educators, that there are 2 camps out there.
Mm.
And there's camp 1 that is teachers are not doing anything. Parents are parents are burdened with the sole responsibility of teaching, and why aren't you doing anything? Nothing's being done. Teachers drop the ball. And then there's camp number 2, which is teachers are doing the best they can, and so are the institutions, and they deserve a break, if you will, during, not a break in work, but like some understanding during the time as we're all adjusting. What are your thoughts?
Well, I can tell you off the top, anybody that thinks that teachers aren't doing enough or not doing anything, they are sadly mistaken, at least from the teachers I've spoken to. I think it's intrinsic. When you become an educator, you want to do, more. You want to connect with your students. You want to feel effective. So I know teachers that are going above and beyond. I mean, they are doing video chats on the hour, every hour. I know some teachers are making YouTube instructional videos. I know others that have been diving into different types of technology. We've talked about previously connecting with students on social media. There
Educators are buying them pizza.
I may have done that once or twice, but I think just hearing from other educators about how they're trying to educate themselves during this time, so they can learn more about distance learning and what tools and technology is out there, and then furthering their craft. So many webinars are happening. I know, Joe, you're taking a class right now at Yale University, right? So
I am. Join me. It's
that.
free. FREE, free. Free.
What's the class?
Science of Well-Being. It's the Science of Well-Being by Dr. Lori Santos. She launched it in spring of 2018. and it is awesome. And it is all about like kind of how you bring happiness to yourself during this time and other times. And I'm also taking another class. Unfortunately, those two teachers' names escape me, but it is a professor at Vanderbilt University and another at MIT. And they collabed and they created a course called Equity Mindset. And I will share both of those classes with you. So one is just about, again, refilling your cup. And the other is like, how do you bring more equity to your mindset so that you could be a more equitable educator? Just, you know, bring that to your paradigm when you're interacting with kids. And we will get those to you. Sorry, please continue.
So, you know, with that in mind, right, we're all here trying to figure out how to navigate through this time and this process. And I wanted to share with you something that I came across. And it's an article I found, and I was speaking with some educators that are from the Chicago area. I don't know if you guys out there know anybody that teaches in the Chicago area, but I was shocked to find something out. Did you know that they actually just began distance learning this past Monday?
Stop.
Did you know that?
Hold on. As in like 4 days ago?
4 days ago, just started. And the question you asked is, well, what were you doing during that time, right? Like, we've been quarantined most places for at least 2 to 3, some 4 or 5 weeks. So I was surprised to learn that they actually just began it.
So what were they doing? Like, do they have some amazing course, or like, what was the point of being out of school and waiting a month?
Well, you know, what I have read about, and again, I've read a few articles, I've spoken to a few educators from that area of the country on Twitter, is that their district was trying to come up with a plan. And they wanted it to be a plan that was going to be effective and adequate and try to reach as many students as possible. So what I have found, though, is even in the midst of them taking that time, and keep in mind, they also had spring break during that time. So this last week was spring break for them. So we're cutting a little slack for that. But that right now, 1 in 3 Chicago public school students have started remote learning without computers. And that's even after that break.
Okay. Right?
I'm not really sure. So let me tell you a few things, and I'll make sure that I put this link in the chat as well so you guys can take a look at it while we're going through it. So again, almost a third of Chicago public school students started this past Monday without a laptop or some sort of learning device. Now keep in mind, here's something to note. Chicago has 640 schools. That is humongous.
That is massive.
Massive. So that's actually the 3rd largest public school district in the country. I didn't know that. So that is just, whoa, over the top. So I do understand their need to take some time and plan things out. But what I have found is, even though they took that time, they have implemented a strategy to give out these devices, and they plan on giving out around 60,000 devices by the end of this week. So I haven't found information so far to see how successful they were at that. However, that makes me ask the question, even if they give out these devices, does that mean that students have internet access at home?
Right.
Because now I have a laptop but no internet. What does that do to me?
Nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Yeah, no, those are crazy things. Those are crazy numbers to think of. And the Boston Globe said that we're at about 15% of students without laptops or a means to access the virtual learning. But we have 54,000 students. Like, we're not in the hundreds of thousands of students, and yet still we have 15%, which is half. But when we think about it, we have, I don't know, what, 12% of their population, give or take.
Yeah, about that.
You know? So, I mean, Laura brings up a really good really good point in the chat, which is that it seems like the burden, it's more the burden of the opportunity gap. Private schools with money had no issue going to virtual learning because they have already had access to technology and software. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think this is a really, really big point. Really big point. It's that how many of our kids had access to this and were prepared to be going to be in this transition. And how many of, and then those teachers who already had all those courses online, then that transition essentially was very smooth. I'm not saying that it goes without hiccups. I'm not saying that there's, oh, because you're already online, there was never a need for in-person classes. Of course, there are things that are different, but at the same time, it's like you were prepared. It's not, you're not scrambling to say, oh, do you have a laptop? Do you have Wi-Fi? No. You've known this since the very beginning, and you've already put in place all the measures necessary to get them what they need.
You would hope, right?
Well, most private schools and the students I know that attend those schools, those have been addressed, and they had more of a plan. Their expectations were a lot different than the public schools that I know of. When they were set loose, it was like, all right, kind of like fend for yourselves. But back to the question about the camps, in trying to understand parents, again, I always say I'm not a parent. I like to make that very, very clear. I am not a parent. So I don't truly know, but human to human, parents, some of them may not be working anymore. They may not be, now they have all this time. They have to think about how they're putting food on tables. They have to think about how they are maintaining the roof over their heads. There's a lot of different stressors right now that parents are experiencing. And then on top of it, it's, and take care of your child and teach them. I know every parent is like, oh yes, I had this child, I'm going to take care of them. But they also didn't plan on having to be a facilitator of education. They didn't plan on having to like really sit down and get them to do their assignments while also trying to kind of navigate how to do it as well. So while being stressed and now having to kind of take on this role that they presumably didn't have before, I feel like it is very easy in those moments to also be like, and you're not doing enough, just out of a state of like frustration. So I wonder how many of the people who actually are saying this are truly just frustrated because they immediately have to step into this, and teachers are like scrambling and not able to necessarily produce everything as well as they want to, and are still making updates and upgrades. So I feel like maybe those camps, it's just like a disconnect.
Well, I would say, and I know some teachers are out there saying, and I saw someone mention in the chat, let me scroll back and see who it was. Oh, Denise, teachers are parents too. So, I mean, it's almost welcome to their world, because as an instructor, as an educator, you're teaching at home just like you're teaching in the classroom. And now you're trying to do both simultaneously. So I think that it's a situation where we're all adapting again, right? So we're not casting any aspersions towards anyone because, they may not be at their best right now as we try to figure this whole situation out. But we're all trying to make it through this. And I think that some parents are frustrated because there hasn't been clear expectations. And I don't think that they fully understand that those expectations don't necessarily come from the teacher level. They come from above the teacher level, even above the principalship level, on a district level, a statewide level, and then for some things on a national level from our government. So it really depends on how each situation is being handled. And I think that parents have a right to be upset at times, but they also should be understanding that we're all working through this together. This happened in a matter of weeks. I mean, think about it. Spring break just happened. How many of us had trips planned to go somewhere for spring break? I know I did. Okay. So, right. So being that this happened so fast, we just have to be understanding. We have to help each other.
Absolutely. And really I think we should be communicating with one another. I think a lot of, as a teacher, we want to know your frustrations. If you are having problems, or you are like, my son, daughter, student needs this, communicate with one another, communicate with us. So I would encourage people who have friends out there who are parents and they are saying these, tell them, please communicate with your educators. They are happy to hear from you, to speak to you, and to do whatever they can to lessen the concerns and mitigate them and solve them where possible.
I believe I believe something that hasn't been spoken about a lot from what I've read and what I've heard is I'd imagine the schools that have great communication in place already with parents, with the community members, they're probably doing better through this situation, right? So if you were already in communication with parents on a daily, weekly basis, I mean, you had a lot of parent engagement. This this was already sort of a situation you could handle because you
Right.
fortified that foundation early in the school year or just through the culture of your school over the course of time. So now parents feel like they're a part of the determining the decision making process in terms of what each school is going to do.
And this goes to moving forward, about how when we come back, we need to really be we need to be intentional about making sure parents are informed and participants in the schooling of their children, not just bystanders. And I think we attempt to do that, but I think our attempts are a little bit mediocre, and we need to be like vamping that up so that parents feel heard and understood, and their voices actually make a difference feeling that way.
Well, I think
Um,
that goes back to what our episode is all about, right? And we're going to get into that shortly. Here is about clearing the runway and providing access to all learners. And I think parents are included in that; they're learners as well. And not every parent has the same amount of access. Some parents are still working during this time. Some have picked up extra shifts because maybe another parent has lost their job, been laid off during this time. So we haven't necessarily taken that into account. But I want to continue to move forward because I think this conversation is heating up, and we want to really discuss what can we do? Because we can't just talk about what's not happening, but what can we do to provide access and opportunity to all learners?
Absolutely. So, in your mind, what would successful distance learning for our most marginalized students look like?
Mm, that's a good question. And I think in a perfect world, right? I know it's not, but in a perfect world where all of our students have access, I think successful distance learning to me resembles the classroom in the sense that our students are learning in a structured environment. And what I mean by that is I've heard some districts that where students have to log in as if it's class time. And I think that helps because that's sort of the norm that we've been used to. And I want to keep that at least for the time being so that if students are logging in, let's say you have a 9 o'clock class, you log in at 9 and we hold class, then that I think helps to keep the structure. So I think right now a lot of students are sort of doing it at their own pace. Some that pace is every day like normal, and others it may be once a week, it may be once every 2 weeks. And I think that again goes back to the expectations that we've set.
Absolutely, absolutely. For I think for our most marginalized students, thinking about our ESL students, our moderate disability students, and also like our students who have like emotional dysregularities, I think it looks like routine and consistency, and also the ability to learn at their pace. Because in my classroom, when I'm thinking about what I do, the most important thing I do is allow them access and the ability to the material at their pace. So I think it's about if you are doing this successfully for those students, then you are making it so they can revisit, they can do it at their pace, they can access the material in a way that's not above their head, and you are doing so in a way that promotes them feeling success in their steps as they progress through the lessons. And you are having routines and structure embedded into the lesson. You are setting up, here's what to expect, here's how it goes now, here's how it'll be later.
To that point, I think that along with that structure, this is an opportunity to really use technology to our advantage, to be able to use the tools that are not maybe necessarily always available to us. When we talk about using translators, we're talking about using different forms to provide the same information. So some teachers, I mean, myself included at times, it's very much old school, paper and pencil in class. And we know for a lot of our students, that doesn't meet their learning style. So now's the time to integrate more videos, more audio, podcasts, for example. I know most states, like our state of Massachusetts, have listening standards. So using a podcast to provide that same information helps. Audio books is something my ELA department we talked about was providing an audio edition of a novel that we're looking to read later this school year.
Love that. Love
So
that.
this is an opportunity to really take advantage of the technology that's before us.
Absolutely. And you know what's really, really cool?
What's that?
Is that we have someone who
Yes.
has been successfully implementing distance learning for a marginalized group of people. Ty, that is your friend, Christian Lopez. Will you tell us a little bit about him?
I would be happy to. I mean, let me start by saying there's just some people you meet, especially in the field of education, that immediately you can feel their passion. It comes through. They don't have to tell you. You almost don't even have to step into their classroom. You just know from their conversations that they are passionate about helping young people. They're passionate about helping them pursue their dreams and aspirations. And they have made it their mission to be a vessel for those young people, to be a resource. And this goes beyond just the time they spend in their classroom. So I am happy to introduce my friend Christian Lopez. Let me tell you a little bit about him. So he's been teaching for 7 years. The first 5 years were in Orlando and Orange County Public Schools. That's where we met. I had some fond memories from that time. And he spent the last 2 years in the metro Atlanta area. Both of those occasions, he's worked in Title I schools and with a high population of Latinx students. So his current school has a high population of recent immigration students from the Central America area. And during his first 5 years, he taught Algebra 1 and then 7th and 8th grade students. And then right now he's teaching 7th grade math, teaching ESOL students. So he is well versed. And I think he's a perfect person to have come to this conversation. Christian, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Hey,
Indeed. Nice to have you. Welcome, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Not a problem. We're glad to have you. We really believe that you're going to provide some answers to questions that a lot of educators have across the country, and just give us some experiential information because you're in the midst of it right now. You're doing it, and we want to know how we can all better ourselves so we can be the best educators we can be.
All right. I mean, wow.
So let's start off right here. Let's talk about your why. What brought you into education? What brought you into the classroom and wanting to be a teacher? And as I mentioned, you've taken that, what we traditionally think of as a teacher, and you've blown it out the water. You've expanded those parameters. So what brought you to this?
Well, it was twofold. My uncle was a teacher down south in Florida, in Miami, and he was like, "Man, we need you. We need you in the classroom. You got great personality. The kids gonna to get to know you, and we need more Latinx male teachers." So that
come on, yes.
So that took me into the realm of getting into education. But then once I got there, I really understood the power. I really understood my why. My why is showing my kids that they got options. Showing them that they're better than they think they are and better than anyone else thinks they are. Ooh. Giving them power in themselves and making sure they're doing everything they can to succeed in whatever light they choose their success in. Because everyone has a determining factor of what success is, but we all individually need to create that for ourselves. And I want to show that to them every day, that you create your success, you determine what you're doing, and let's get it going. So that's my why.
That is beautiful.
I felt
that is beautiful. Whoo! Every day they can bring themselves up. Thank you for that. I think that is so empowering for youth to see somebody who they can say, hey, outside society is saying this about Latinx men, but this is actually what you can become. And you are literally there being an example, setting an example, and rewriting the narrative with them so that they can create their own destinies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't remember having Latinx teacher in any school when I was in K through 12.
Wow.
And much less a male Latinx teacher. It was non-existent.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had one, Mr. Delgado. I haven't forgotten him because it was literally one. He was my 6th grade math teacher.
I know there was.
Thinking. Oh, I had one. I don't remember her name, but she taught me geometry.
Oh, good. The only ones I ever saw were Spanish teachers. So I was like, all right.
Yeah,
But
trying to put us in a box? Absolutely
yeah,
not. Absolutely not.
representation matters.
Yes. So thank you so much for doing that. And I wish we could stay and spend more time on that, but I want to jump into like this time that we're in right now. And before I start, what district are you in?
Gwinnett County Public Schools.
Gwinnett County Public Schools. And I wanted to know what plan of action was provided to you by the district, or were there set expectations provided by your school?
So beginning, we have a program, E-Class, that we're supposed to have our course pages on, and throughout the year they make us do certain things and tell us to update it once in a while. So that was always from the beginning. But once we went into digital, there pretty much our admin was like just making sure that we were posting some form of assignments and being available for the kids to answer any questions. And that was pretty much the only guidance that they gave us as far as setting up digital learning.
So it doesn't sound like they gave any like really clear expectations. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, there wasn't. They were just making sure you post assignments. So it wasn't really, you need to do videos, you need to instruct. And so, I mean, that's at the beginning. And ever since then, there's a little more that they've been adding. They just added something to us today with live teaching sessions, which is okay, because I've already been doing it. So I was literally talking to the principal earlier, and because I was confused, like, what do you mean? And she's like, oh, we're setting up, the county wants us to do live tutoring sessions. And I was like, oh, all right, I've been doing that for the last 3 weeks. So it's nothing new to me. But I mean,
but I'm also thankful they're making it mandatory for all the instructors, because,
yes,
you know, not everybody obviously took the initiative that you did that said, hey, distance learning doesn't mean indirect learning, right? We can have direct learning through distance. And you already understood that like that, but I'm glad that they're making it very clear that for those of you who didn't catch that wave, you need to get on it.
Yeah. And from what I've heard is the area superintendent was actually on people's pages and looking at things, and there was parents complaining about direct instruction and stuff like that. So I was like, I get it, I understand, but you preaching to the choir.
The area superintendent was also on your page, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about that. I heard you received a bit of a kudos. We want to hear.
Yeah, so my direct AP emailed me and said that they were auditing class pages, and the area superintendent went onto my page, and that he really enjoyed it, and he sees certain collaboration within the students and within our content, and the way that it's laid out for the kids, where they can have that instruction, whether it's YouTube or myself making videos, but then they have the opportunity to answer questions and figure things out within that whole framework, not just watch a video and then go do an assignment or take a test or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's excellent to hear. So it sounds like your district sort of, it was very ambiguous. They didn't really tell you to do this or do that in the beginning, and they've sort of at each step of the way have tried to implement a few more things. I think that gives a lot of creativity to certain educators, that you can implement almost anything that you want, as long as you know it's going to be in the best interest of your students. Mm-hmm. So what was your planning strategy going into this distance learning session in regards to making your lessons accessible and equitable to all your students? Because as we mentioned, you teach ESOL students. We already know that there are issues with access to technology. So what was your plan of action?
So just discussing on my students themselves. So I have about 120 students.
Woo! Okay.
I have, out of those 120, a quarter of them have been in the country less than a year. Wow. Literally have gotten here this year. About 2/3 in the last 2 years. So I have students that know no English, right? And this form of education, just coming to this country and getting this education, is beyond what they've been through. And some of my students really have very informal education within their own countries. So it's been a struggle just in general. But as far as myself, when I first started day one, I'm like, oh man, what am I gonna do? Like I gotta figure this out.
Right.
So then that first week to me was a little rough. It was rough around the edges. The kids were kind of confused about how to access things, how to submit. So every day I was working on figuring out the easiest way for my kids to access it and to submit. So that first week was pretty rough on the students, and so then that second week, then I realized within in our framework and the E-class, we use E-class. I don't know if you guys have used that. It's the system that our county is using.
Okay.
So it's like your version of Google Classroom?
It's kind of like Canvas. I don't know if you guys know.
Oh, like Canvas or Blackboard? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Okay.
And I never didn't use Google Classroom, so that's not. I mean, I could figure it out, but I didn't want to throw that onto them all of a sudden.
Important.
Because we sometimes as adults and as educators and everyone around, we forget how is this going to look like and what is it going to be for the students. Yes, they're very resilient, but it's a lot at once.
Right. Absolutely.
So I wanted to keep it simple as possible, keep it on what we've been doing, but then try to make it more simple. So then within E-class, I figured out that quizzes, like creating a quiz, was the easiest and most effective way for the kids to see. Another thing, sorry, let me go back. About 2/3 of my students are using cell phones to access all of this. So that in itself is the issue, because cell phones sometimes are really small. You can't see things, you can't access things. So for me, knowing that, I was like, I need to make all my lessons, everything that I'm doing, is simple and easy for them to access on their phone, so they can respond, they can go through the lesson, watch the videos, take some notes, and practice all on their phone. So, and that's been progressively, to me, I think I've been getting better at it, and the kids are learning, and I've have the tutoring sessions, and I ask them, how is it going? Do they like the lessons? Do they like what's going on? And they say, yeah, I like the way it's set up. Sometimes it's a little hard, but it's math, so content can't really do nothing. Yeah. So
I really understand, what you're saying about simplifying, right? Because something that Joe and I talked about on a previous podcast was even just the amount of passwords and usernames that come associated with each piece of technology. And so you're talking about simplifying that, streamlining it, so our students have access in the easiest way possible.
Right. And hearing you say that, like, even though Google Classroom may be a useful tool, you can't just throwing that at them is still stressful. Just because it may be useful doesn't mean that we should use it right now. We talked about that last week. It's like, how do we just narrow down what we are using so that there's consistency and they don't feel doubly overwhelmed, because now it's like, oh, not only are we using this platform, but we're also using this platform and 4 different learning tools at the same time. It's like, whoa. Yeah, so I really, really liked that you decided to just stay with what the kids know. And then even in that, think about, how am I making this, again, accessible, not just in content, but also in accessible, knowing what devices they have at their disposal to use. So I really like that. But thinking about that, Christian, how did you engage your ESL students, especially the ones who have just gotten here, who may have had limited, didn't have the background of education in coming into 7th grade. What are you doing to remove that barrier and promote engagement? How have you been successful in doing this?
Well, I mean, it's an ongoing battle. One is trying to just get them to participate. So I've been making phone calls and texting parents and students and offering tutoring all day pretty much. So whenever they need help, I'm like, all right, I'm tutoring, but also I'm providing instruction in their home language because most of my students they speak Spanish. So I'm doing that in Spanish. Like,
hey, yes.
By the way, there's no state test, there's no final test. We're gonna learn, but we're gonna learn in the context of what we need to.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm gonna give you, and you're gonna learn this in Spanish, and that's gonna directly translate to what I need you to know in the English. So that's what I'm doing. Like, all the assignments and the questions are in English with Spanish translation. All the videos, I have English and Spanish. So I'm trying to get them to understand the concepts more than just the language, because it's too difficult to try to teach them the language and the concepts all in the same construct in the same time frame and dealing with all this digital and all the craziness. So going back to as simple as possible.
I like that. I like
Well
that.
said.
Yes, very much so. And I really love that. Actually, Tyrell was saying he's embarking on his Spanish journey. And I said, I'm jumping back on that with him. But this is part of that. It's like, you need to bridge that gap in that, like, I'm asking you to learn something and I'm asking you to learn English while you learn this. It's too much.
It's crazy. It's literally impossible sometimes, because some of the concepts that we're trying to ask our kids to learn in our native language is difficult, but then you don't understand, and then you're trying to learn the language as well, and you're just it gets overwhelming really, really quick.
I can only imagine. Truly, I didn't consider it until I got to education that I was privileged to have English as my first language, and how, being that this is a country where English is prevalent, that sets me, in front of so many other folks. So I didn't really think about that as a privilege, but in fact, and indeed it is.
And sorry, what's crazy is I didn't either, because my first language is English. The only one that spoke Spanish was my grandma. Mm-hmm. So I learned from my grandma how to speak Spanish. So for me, it wasn't, and coming from Orlando, which is super diverse within the Latinx community, and understanding like there's all types, and then moving up here, man, it was eye-opening to say the least, that these structures that they have, and for especially the Latinx community and the recent immigrants and undocumented, it's very interesting to see in how things are structured here.
It's not set up for the success.
I'm sorry?
In Atlanta, right?
Yeah, outside of Atlanta, like Metro Atlanta and Lilburn. So it's not too far out of city Atlanta.
I think we can be frank. The structures that are in place are not set up for Latinx students to succeed, especially those who have recently immigrated here, let alone the undocumented students. It is not a system that is set up for them. In fact, I'll take it a step further. It's not a system that considers them, if we're being very honest.
Oh, no, not at all. So just one example is, I have over about 1,900 students in our school. About 80% of them are Latinx, and it's about 30, 40%, 50% are ESOL. Mm-hmm. There is not one admin or guidance counselor that can speak Spanish.
Oh.
Wow. Wow.
That's embarrassing.
That is terrible. And this year is better. Last year was like 3 or 4 classroom teachers. This year is about 6 or 7 classroom teachers that are able to speak Spanish. So yeah, it is definitely, it was, like I said, it was eye-opening coming from Orlando to here to see the lack of Latinx representation within admin, within teachers, within it all. And I've been recruiting and trying to recruit people. So if y'all know anybody wanting to move to Metro Atlanta that can speak Spanish or Latinx, let me know. I can get them an interview real quick.
No, but that's so real, because that goes back to what we were saying before. It's like, how are you engaging parents in this? How are they included in anything regarding the school if no one can really speak to them?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say we do have all the office staff speak Spanish, but there's no people in power.
And again, we need to rewrite that. Again, we need to be elevating, our people of color into these top positions, so that we have seats at the tables, so that we have say in who's hired, and we have representation in all striations of the hierarchy, like all of it. We have 2 more questions for you. I know that you've got live tutoring to get to.
I'm still really stuck on the fact that there are no administrators, no counselors that speak Spanish, which, I mean, I don't know how you communicate with your parents, with your community, if you're always looking for a go-between, a translator. So that is just, it's mind-blowing, to say the least.
And just to put it this way, I have some students that literally walked from Guatemala to the border.
Wow.
12, 13, 14 years old, walked from Guatemala to the border of Mexico and USA by themselves. Some of them left their parents at home, mom back in Guatemala, back in Honduras. They're coming up here. And for me, seeing that, like, how are we getting to these children? How can we get them to the point where they're open and they're ready to learn and dealing with their hardships of just getting here? Because I can't imagine myself, taking that journey by myself that takes a month or 2, and then sitting in a classroom full of a bunch of people that you don't know, and everything's in English.
Right. And how often is that disregarded?
All the time. Because I've, since day one, or since I've talking to my kids and understanding where they're coming from and what they're doing, I've been trying to get someone to our school to help our children cope with whatever they're dealing with. It's not necessarily life-threatening, but it's definitely hinders. So trying to get some form of guidance or some counseling or something, or just ways for them to learn how to deal with all of this. And I'm still fighting that fight.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Ty.
I was just going to mention, to that point, thank you again for sharing that. And I noticed in the chat, lady said, educational trauma is real. It truly is. Man, I'm just blown away to hear these stories. But I know that we're on a time crunch, so Joe, go ahead.
Yes, and before that, thank you, Christian, for fighting that fight for them, for being an advocate for your students, because the truth is, oh my God, I'm so sorry. The truth is that we are more than, I'm so sorry. My dad is calling, actually, and it's ringing everywhere. So I ended
That's all right.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry about that. That was real life.
Right?
Oh my goodness.
We're all in the midst of transition, right? We're all in the midst of it.
We're all connected, right?
Thank you for doing that. Thank you so much. And I just want to go back to this, those human teacher moments. This is a dual question. What is a moment through this distance learning that has made you truly feel like you're teaching, or truly warmed you or filled you with joy? And what is the moment that you miss most about being away from the classroom?
Let me answer that second part first. I miss the connections with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I miss the joking around and saying hello and just greeting them into my classroom and just acknowledging their presence in our world today. And just knowing that we in this together, and just like having that connection. That's what it's truly what it's about for me. The math aspect and the teaching, anybody can really do that. Like, if you're good at math, you're good at language arts, you can teach. To me, it's beyond that. What is that connection? How am I reaching these young ladies and young gentlemen, and what am I doing to help them out to better themselves in their future? And that's what I really miss. So the first part, how do I know I'm doing? I don't. I really don't. I'm hoping that I'm doing something good, and that my kids are learning, and they do post like discussion boards and saying like, oh, this was easy, this was good. So that giving me those things, and the students telling me that they're doing okay, that's what's definitely motivating me, and I hope I'm doing all right. But it's, for me,
No, it was a positive. We wanted to hear a positive moment about like that a moment that like filled you up with joy even during this online learning.
I mean, to be honest with you, I'm still waiting for it. Because I mean, for me, it's just always, I'm trying to make sure I'm doing better. Mm-hmm. So I'm not complacent, and so it's always like, all right, what can I do better? And as my student, so hopefully, I don't know, so.
The students can tell that you care, and I think that's at the foundation of it, is that they know that there's a feeling there where Mr. Lopez cares about me as a human. He cares about my success. The fact that you took it upon yourself to make videos, have tutoring hours ahead of the district, making that a mandate, that shows the students that, hey, I'm here for you. Even in the midst of this pandemic that we're going through, I'm here for you, and I'm looking to make sure that your learning is going to be continuous. We're not going to allow this to stop your learning, because we know that in many aspects, education is power. I mean, information is power. So, our students need that, especially
for Black and brown students, man.
Yes.
That's all we got.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us don't have that wealth foundation and that capability of doing certain things. So education is the only way.
Very true. Very true. Well, it looks like it's almost that time where I know you have to get to tutoring.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you again, Christian, for joining us. Your school is without a doubt very blessed to have you there. And your students, I can't speak enough about how much of an advocate I know you are. And I'm sure that they feel that even through the screen, that they feel that you're advocating for them behind the scenes, and that you are there to be a vessel, to be a resource. And I know that we also share some students from the past that we still, keep in contact with. We've gotten even a few, if I share just a quick moment, we've gotten a few of them to tell us that they've been accepted to college and receiving scholarships. So
we got some Morehouse students.
Yes.
Okay.
I got one of my students got a full ride to college up in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Where's he going?
She's going, can't remember the name. But yeah, it's a liberal arts school, like a small school.
Chapman?
No.
We'll have to connect. We'll definitely connect, because I'll make sure that we keep that line of communication open, especially since I'm up here and Joe included.
Definitely. She's such a good kid, and she's come a long way from when I met her back in 8th grade. She was going through a lot back then. So, but yeah, full ride. So then it's exciting to see the kids doing their thing and doing so. But yeah, I see on the little chat, if you can pass my email out to anybody, we can connect.
Absolutely.
We will definitely drop that in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. We know your students are waiting on you, so we'll let you go now, but man, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I appreciate you guys having me, and thank you guys for putting this together. It's going to be, it's dope.
Oh, it won't be the last time.
Oh,
Mr. Lopez, it won't be the last time.
All right. Y'all take it easy. Have a good day.
You
too.
Right.
Bye. Oh my goodness. It was anybody else like I was blessed. Oh my goodness. I was blessed. So we actually had quite a bit more to share with you, but our time has come to an end, and that just means that we will just, we just have more content to give you. Blessings on blessings.
I can't wait to have more of these conversations, and we have a lot of guests coming up in the coming weeks. Those of you who would love to come on our show as a guest, let us know in the chat. Let us know in the comments of our social media posts. Email us at or not at, but to be podcast@gmail.com. And let us know, also recommend some folks if you believe that there are some educators that are really doing some amazing things, especially during this time of online distance, remote learning. Let us know who those folks are so that we can reach out to them, and we would love to get them on the show as a guest, because these are the conversations we need to have. As I said earlier, this is our opportunity to shape what's going to be the new normal, because that old thing didn't work. We don't want that old thing back.
No, stay away, old thing. We are getting rid of the status quo. We are onward and upward, onward and upward. So a few last closing things. E4E's Netflix party is tomorrow at 3. And we will be watching Madame C.J. Walker. So please tune in. Yes, it is awesome. So please tune in. And we can't close this without our challenge. So last week we challenged you to be active. The week before that, we challenged you to be thankful. And this week, we're challenging you to combine those two things. So, I know, right? I know, don't get too worried. So, in whatever capacity you can in these moments, we want you to be thankful for your health and be active in caring about your body, okay? So we know in quarantine life, every moment is snack time, right? And I don't know, but that COVID-19.
I see you looking at me. You look sideways, Joe. Don't tell on me now. Don't tell on me. My wife's already getting on me enough. Come on now.
The COVID-19 is real.
The COVID-19 pounds, if that's what you mean. Yes.
That's exactly what I mean, and even though I do not quote me on this, it is not about losing weight at all. That is not what I'm about to preach to you. But as Lucretia said, we are what we eat. And that still applies right now. When we eat better, we feel better. And no, I'm not about to tell you to be vegan. Hell no. Y'all know. Y'all know.
Oh. Shout out to the vegans out there. Shout out to the vegans. Don't talk bad about the vegans. My sister's embarked on a vegetarian journey, so I see it firsthand.
But this is so, do what makes you feel good, right? It's all about doing what makes you feel good. And so we are challenging you to be in the kitchen chefing it up, okay? Wrist twisting like a stir fry. Hey. That's what we are telling you. You want snacks? Make your snack. You want a fancy dinner? Make your dinner. You want a Popeye's chicken sandwich? Be your own Louisiana. Fast.
We will be posting all week of ourselves in the kitchen. Yes. I know Joe was making bread just the other night. My wife and I have a few dishes planned that we're going to get in the kitchen and hopefully show off. So we want to see you posting about it. Make sure you tag us in your post on social media. We're on every social media platform, so follow us there at 2B Podcast. Yep. And so in the meantime, remember to be good to yourself, to be true to yourself, and to educate yourself. Bye. See you later.